Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Relationships. Woo! And
Yay.
I am Julie Murphy, and I wrote a book called Awaken Your Wealth, and I'm the money chick. The thing is that money is the result of everything else in your life. And so I've been doing an awakening series, Awaken Your Health on Monday nights, Awaken Your Spirit on Tuesday mornings, and on Thursday mornings, we are doing Awaken Your Relationships with Rita. Rita, can you tell everyone about yourself?
Absolutely. So I've been in a healing practice for the last 14 years. I'm a professional healer, and I specialize in helping women work with their body and their nervous system and their subconscious so that they can break out of narcissistic codependent relationships. I know that sounds like really complicated, right? It's really,
I think we make it complicated, and it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't have to be. So instead of, or along with therapy, women learn why their body reacts the way that it reacts and how to stop it from reacting that way so that they can make better choices and they can create a life that works for them instead of falling back into the pattern, the default of their body reacting. I help their body stop reacting so you can actually make good choices.
Well, and that's so true. And I think for so many women, we actually don't listen to our bodies. You know, we've discounted our own intuition, our own guidance system, because we've been conditioned to work in the world as if we were men. And that is not actually the way that it works. And I'm not saying that only women do it, but what I'm saying is that women ignore their body intelligence more than men do. And I think it's so critical, the work that you do in the world to help people get to this other place. And that's why I called today Boundaries, 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 because I am learning over and over again from my past experience of being in a narcissistic relationship that, you know what, you just need to hold healthy boundaries.
But a lot of us get scared. That's the thing. It's hard to hold boundaries because you don't know. Yeah. Well, and a narcissist is so dysregulated. They're so over the top, because of their own issues, because of their physical issues, their mental issues, their past, their traumas. And they're emotionally dangerous. So a lot of women don't want to hold boundaries because they're afraid of the consequences.
Yeah. And do you think that is a person born a narcissist, or are they created to be one based on their traumas in their childhood?
Both. The people who struggle the most with narcissism tend to be those who have an underlying physical issue like ADD, ADHD, bipolar, something where their nervous system gets dysregulated fast. So it could be that a lot of people who struggle with narcissism have underdeveloped amygdala. What that means is that it triggers fast and it triggers hard. And you can't hold that space as an adult. So they trigger fast. Now, if you've got somebody who does this, and then you add on trauma or a difficult family system, and think about it. If someone has an underlying physical issue, it's probably run in the family. And if it's run in the family, then there's probably a history of people not being able to control their emotions, which then creates trauma. So, I mean, it's almost like karmic in family systems of, if you've got this underlying physical issue and you don't learn how to manage it, then you're going to end up with a bunch of traumas naturally, karmically, family history. And you'll just keep repeating the pattern because nobody ever valued or understood or taught someone how to keep themselves grounded and level in difficult situations when they're stressed.
Well, and Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, talks about that, 97% of the time it is not our DNA, but yet our life experiences that actually create our physical realities and the way we respond to the world. And most people think it comes from our DNA, but it doesn't actually come from our DNA. It actually comes from our life experiences. And when you continue to have these experiences from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, it's repeating itself. It's because you're responding to your children the same way your parents responded to you.
Right.
And it just continues to compound, and it keeps rolling, you know, as they say, shit keeps rolling downhill.
And it keeps compounding. But, you know, in today's day and age, we have enough information that we can really break these cycles. And because it's not personal. Someone who's narcissistic, it's not personal. It's that they have a difficult time regulating their emotions, and they've got trauma triggers in their brain, which they don't know how to deal with. And the only coping skill that has worked for them successfully so far has been getting angry and being manipulative.
Right.
Whereas there are way better coping skills, but it's not, they're not commonly known, or they're not accepted as valuable. They're seen as pampering, or they're seen as indulgent, instead of realizing that there's a physical component that needs to be taken care of. And if you don't take care of it, then you're going to stay stuck. You're going to keep doing the same things.
Well, and this is where, you know, I remember when it was right before I actually signed the papers for my divorce. And I had this new client that came into my office, and I go, how do you feel? You're divorced now. Like, because usually people are on one end of the pendulum, that they're the one that wanted it or didn't want it, and I'll get a different reaction. So I always communicate in that fashion. And I said, so what is it that, how do you feel? And she goes, I just wish I would have divorced him when my children were little. And she has 4 kids. And I literally, the first time meeting this woman, just started bawling, crying right in front of her, because it was like the day before I had filed for divorce, and my 4 children were 2, 4, 6, and 8 years old at the time. And hers were now in their 20s. And so her children were now repeating the patterns of what went on between her and her husband. And she just thought she would, and I think there's so many people out there that say, oh, I'm going to stay together for the kids' sake. And, you know, and then once the kids are raised, then I'll move on. And so many times we don't realize that actually could be creating more damage, because you're not interrupting the patterns and the experience of what's going to be passed down to that next generation. And she still to this day, you know, sees those patterns repeating it. And I'm living in the world of going, you know what? No, I have to find a new way to do this, because I'm not going to have this go to the next generation with my kids. And how do we shift it, and how do we change it? And so I've learned that I too have to allow myself to learn along that way, because I was taught a different way as well, because I didn't know how to interface. And I know, Rita, you say to me all the time, well, Julie, you're different now, because I've become more conscious and more aware of these patterns, which is why I want to share this with so many people, because it's been so enlightening to me to find out, going, wow, when you take your power back and you start to actually do things that feel in right alignment for you today, not what it was yesterday or 15 years ago when I had gotten married, but today. And then just continuing to wake up every day and find the courage to take that next right step, you know, because it's not easy. And what's been also interesting to me, which to your point that it's all interrelated with our health, is that the minute that I unpack another layer of what created my past, I actually get physically healthier. I've had more people tell me in the last couple months how I look 10 years younger. And I'm like, well, thanks a lot. I'm almost 50. This is fabulous, you know? And it's because I'm dealing with the things that caused generations before me to age much faster. And because I'm going, nope, we're not doing those patterns anymore. We're going to shift this.
You know, shame is a big driver of people staying in patterns. We look at each other and our reactions and responses to things, and we shame ourselves. Other people shame us. You know, why are you getting angry? Why are you manipulating me? And all of those are just stress patterns. And it's these judgmentalisms we have about ourselves and about the other person that keeps us trapped in this emotional thing behind whose fault is it? Who's to blame?
Yeah.
If we can take all of that off the table, if every experience is simply neutral,
not easy
to do, but it's much easier when you purposely, consciously train your body to stay calm. You're able to look at things in a neutral way. You're able to set boundaries. You're able to stand your ground. Right now, what gets in the way for most women are these beliefs that there's something wrong with them, or that they're broken, or that this is just the way that it is. And if we take that off the table and say, no, these are physical things you can do something about. Like, if you have a headache, would you take an aspirin? Hell yeah. I don't want to suffer with a headache. You know, and it's the same thing with emotional traumas, but they're so ephemeral. They're so wiggly, and oh, we're in therapy, and oh, it's vague. But if we take that off the table and say, no, this is what's happening in the body, let's deal with what's happening in the body, miraculously, you find that you don't trigger as much, your body gets healthier, because there's a lot of physical stuff going on when you trigger, with your immune system and with circulation and with your heart. And, you know, it's about taking the shame and the judgmentalism away and dealing with the real problem, not just talking about it.
And we don't have to call in a physical health crisis to actually shift.
Yes.
That's
you just have to give yourself the time.
Right. So here, what I have found through the years, and I don't know if this is true for you, Rita, but so people, we choose our soul. I believe we come into this world and we choose our soul's path. So if this is your soul's path right here, that then we have free will that comes in here and goes, oh, I have choices and I get to make all these choices. And then what happens is, the farther the choices that you make from your soul's path, the bigger the crisis is. So if you're like this, from your choices of your free will, from your soul's path, you're going to have a much bigger crisis than someone who stayed pretty close to that path. And we know when we're not following our intuition, because our intuition is our soul's path, like where we've negotiated ourselves away. And this can be really, we're talking about personal relationships here, but it can be in business relationships. It can be in family relationships. It can be in any kind of relationship that you have, because you're the same person. So you're going to repeat the patterns in every facet of life. And I have found that usually when one part of your life goes, the other ones are about to go after that. If you've decided to shift, you know, you'll lose that job where you put up with people. Or like for me, I don't have the same employees I had 5 years ago, you know, and it's because I'm plugging into the world in a different fashion. So those relationships serve their purpose, and then they moved on, and it was perfect. You know, it was good for them and good for me, you know, and, but so many of us, you know, we call in these crises and then we think that like we're the victim of those crises. Like, no. This is where you have to truly step into your empowerment and go, I'm going to not create this to be a snowball effect going down the path. And I'm going to choose to take my power. But I know for so many people, once you become aware of these patterns and once you start to see what it is that you're going through, there is a grieving process that we have to allow ourselves to go through to feel the feelings of all the stuff that we didn't choose to feel all those years. You know, and that's not easy.
You have to, for me, healing comes down to, do you have a peaceful heart or do you not have a peaceful heart? If you do not have a peaceful heart, you need to do something as soon as possible to get a peaceful heart. And only from that place, when your heart is peaceful, it means that you aren't, your brain isn't firing all over the place. It means that your skin isn't crawling. It means that your stomach isn't upset. It means that you are in your parasympathetic nervous system, and your brain, your head brain, your heart brain, and your gut brain are all talking to each other. That's intuition. It's picking up, you're picking up thousands, hundreds of thousands of bits of information that when your heart is not peaceful, you can't tap into. You can't understand, because it's as if you're on a roller coaster and you're completely out of control and you're just trying to hold on to get through it. That's being dysregulated.
Right.
What's being regulated is when you say, you know what? I don't want to go on that roller coaster today. I'm kind of done with that.
So true.
And you make a different choice. You purposely, you look at the two paths and you say, do I want to keep being scared and angry and anxious? Or do I want to cut it off, head it off at the pass, and move in a different direction? And you have to purposely put in the tools and the information that you've been using in order to have that peaceful heart. You have to give yourself permission, or find someone to hold the space to give you permission to start doing that. And the grieving process isn't where you feel stuck. It's not where you're like, I'm just holding on and praying I can get through this. The grieving process is where you give yourself space and time every day, hours, days, weeks, months, if you have to, in order to unpack all of the emotions that are physically on your nervous system and keeping you in a place of fight or flight.
Well, and you said it earlier, you said, about being anxious, and in my process of unpacking what was going on in my own relationship, it was really interesting. We went to this mediator, and she had said, this is like the first session, and she said, oh, Julie, you're an anxious dog. And I was like, I am not anxious. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not the one taking anti-anxiety medications. I am not anxious. I didn't identify, there's no part of me that ever even identified with being anxious. And so and she goes, no, you're an anxious dog. And I go, okay, and I'm definitely not a dog.
Right, I know. I mean, how are you going to open up this mediation session calling me a dog to start with? What are you getting at here? I would have been pissed.
Well, I just sat there and I was like, no. She goes, no, let me explain this to you. She goes, Joel, you come home, you live in a high rise, you take the elevator to your 7th floor and you get off. And then the minute you get off the elevator, you walk up to your front door and you're like, oh, and then your dog comes up and, and I'm like, I don't have a dog. What are you talking about? She goes, no, just bear with me. And then that dog comes to the front door and it's loved and it's kissed and you play. Then tomorrow you come home and you get off the 7th floor, you walk in, and then you're somewhere else, your brain's somewhere else. And then you walk in the door and the dog greets you because wants those hugs and kisses again. And you kick the dog straight across the room because you're ticked off about something else. And she goes, you're the dog. And I go, I'm the dog? And she goes, yeah, you don't know every day you come home and get off the elevator, which one's going to show up. And I knew right then and there, I literally could tell every day that I got off the elevator what kind of evening it was going to be, because it depended on what was going on in my house at that time.
Yes.
And I didn't know if I was going to duck and cover or if I was going to because I went into management mode of whatever was going on. And I realized, wow, I was anxious and I was the dog. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what was happening in my household with myself.
Mm-hmm. And so on an energetic level, you were tying into someone else and allowing them to decide for you how you were going to feel.
Yes.
And the difference, the thing that shifts is you decide for yourself how you're going to feel, and you take steps to make sure you feel that way. So if you're
Right.
if you're getting off the elevator and worrying and wondering whether you're going to be attacked or kicked or loved, or if it's going to be a nice night,
Yeah.
you are putting the responsibility for your mental and emotional health on someone else. And that is a codependent relationship.
Yep.
When you decide for yourself, I'm no
Yep.
longer going to allow anyone to control my inner world. I'm going to decide for myself how I want to feel. Then you
Yep.
start gathering the tools and putting the time in place in order to find that peaceful heart, to stay regulated, to stay in your parasympathetic nervous system. And when you can do that, there's a great tool I used recently. It's another tool. I don't remember what it's called. I'm going to have to look it up. But when someone is trying to make you crazy, and this is what it looks like. Let's see if we can do it. You can even be in a moving car. So you take one foot and you put it on the ground. All right. And you take the other one and you put your ankle on your knee, one hand on your knee, one hand on the bottom of your foot. And you can do it with either leg. If you do this while someone is trying to make you crazy, you will not go crazy.
Why
it will
that?
keep you from going crazy. It talks to the body and it tells it not to go into dysregulation.
You know what's really funny? I sit like that all the time, and I didn't even realize that does something. I do that all the time. I sit there like that.
Yes. Hand on the bottom of your foot, the other one on your knee. It keeps you from flipping the switch. We have to look at anxiety and things like that, like a flipping of a switch.
Yeah,
because that's really what's happening. And if you can keep your switch from being flipped, then you are the one in control of the conversation. You're coming home and you're not the anxious dog, because you're the big dog that's deciding what the energy is going to be in the house for the night, and it's not going to be crazy.
Yeah.
And you're going to be the leader in the relationship. And the fact that you are centered and level and calm, psychologically, everyone will look to you as the leader. They will look to you to determine whether it's a good day or a bad day, because you're the one who's calm.
One of my spiritual teachers talks about the fact that the divine feminine, the female in the relationship, is the leader and the man is the head. And I always think of the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, when she goes, right before she was getting married, she goes, the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head whatever direction she wants. And I think about that, and I don't necessarily think that the women are in control. It's to have a healthy relationship, you're together. But what's interesting to me about that is that I believe that there's some truth to what the spiritual teacher talks about, because of the fact that women are not stepping into their power. They are not leading from their divine feminine energy, and in the best aspects of who women are. And when that happens, there is breakdown in relationship, small or big, but compounds over time if it's continued to, manifest and compound. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I have learned. It's like, oh, I didn't really lead, because to your point, I didn't walk into the house saying I'm going to behave like this. I just kind of managed and tried to fix everything that was going on. And that just created more dysfunction.
Yeah, it does, because you're letting the person who is unstable determine the quality of your life. And you really can't let the crazies drive the bus. You have to take the wheel yourself. And women tend to be more intuitive because of how their brain is wired. Men tend to compartmentalize more, so they get more of that tunnel vision.
Yep.
And women, they're able to pay attention to more connections. So they're able to pay attention to their head brain, their heart brain, and their gut brain. And that's intuition. Intuition is when all of your brains are talking to each other and you can hear them. If you are dysregulated, your intelligence goes down, your intuition goes down, you can't hear anything, your brain's firing all over the place. And so when you would get off the elevator and feel anxious, here's a different scenario of how it could look. You get off the elevator, you're feeling, you're feeling the energy of the room, and you're like, you know what? I want this to be a nice night, which means that I need to be calm. What do I need to do to get calm right now, to stay calm before I walk in that door?
Right.
So that it's my energy that's directing the evening, not reacting to someone else. You have to step off the elevator and decide for yourself how you want to feel, and then do whatever you need to do to feel that way. And then that will shape all the other interactions.
Yep. Totally agree with that. It's
It's a physical issue.
Yeah, and I think over the years you don't realize that it's continuing to morph and continuing to develop in a certain area. Because to me, it was about little chips of it happening along the way, and and honestly, it's no fault of nobody. It takes two people to participate in everything, and once I realized that that participation was not in a healthy direction and that things needed to shift, but it takes two people to want it to shift. And that's where things, at that time didn't work out in my world. And so for those of you who are watching this, like, as you start to hold boundaries that are true for you in that moment, it could cause for great growth in your relationship. It could also cause for things to dissipate and fall away. And people need to know that it's not good or bad either way. It just is. But you're choosing you and choosing your own personal empowerment over somebody else. And there is nothing wrong with that. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about how, we were always taught when we were children, to do the right thing. I'm like, yes, but the right thing was defined as do for others. And your consideration may or may not have been a part of the equation. And usually it wasn't. It was about do the right thing because this is the way you do it.
Well, that's what they told women. I mean, you just have a nice little tick that's what they told women. Men all along were still, that advice was for men.
Yep.
Men struggle with the compartmentalizing. They struggle with their intuition. They struggle getting out of their own ego. They struggle getting out of their own self-absorbed cravings and desires. They struggle with that. And the advice of do for other people and don't worry as much about yourself is because many men needed to hear that. But women were the ones that were listening, and we took that on as that was our charge. Men all along were taking care of their own needs. Them taking care of somebody else was second or third down the list. So they had to be browbeat into, no, you need to get your head out of your butt and start, thinking about other people and having empathy. Women didn't need that advice.
Right. Well, and I came to the conclusion of the fact that, doing the right thing is doing the right thing the most self-loving and self-caring for yourself. Right?
Because if you do, everyone will benefit.
Yeah. So here's a question from someone who's watching. Do children who grew up as anxious dogs under a crazy become like that themselves?
You know what? There's a idea. I used to teach kindergarten. So one of my first careers was how we learn, how to teach and how we learn. And if someone is born with a physical ailment or a physical problem, it can be a blessing or it can be a curse. If they learn how to work with it, it makes them unique and an individual, and they get gifts and miracles and understandings that nobody else can get because this person went through this difficult experience.
Right.
If it's considered something that's wrong or bad and it goes into the shadows, then they stay trapped in that shame and that guilt, and they'll continue with the pattern. So being in a narcissistic relationship isn't necessarily a bad thing, because what it does is, if we can look at it as neutral and learn the skills to regulate the nervous system in a world that is getting crazier and crazier, because you're not good. Okay, you divorced the guy, fine, you divorced him. Guess what? There's 20 more right around the corner, whether you date them or not. You know, it doesn't matter. They're everywhere. If you
Yeah.
don't learn how to regulate yourself and teach your kids how to regulate themselves in the most difficult situation, your own home,
Mm,
then they're not going to be able to handle everything else that's going on in the world. If you can teach them how to look at someone and see them as dysregulated, and
right.
how do we regulate the nervous system? How do we
Right.
create a calm, centered environment? These children, I'm so excited about the kids that are learning all these havening and TAT points, like your kids.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, wow, they're going to be able to walk into any boardroom. They're going to be the president. They're going to be the leaders,
Right.
because they know how to stay grounded and calm, even when you're being attacked by the people who are supposed to love you the most.
Right. Because kids, if to this person's point, kids live in a household with somebody who's got that crazy. Do
Mhm.
you take it on? Yes. So that's what I was talking about earlier in Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, is that 97% of our response to the external world comes from our experience in the environments that we grew up in, more than our DNA.
Right.
So,
The
yes,
DNA is
yes,
just it's just the thing that this person has to handle. Like everybody has something to handle, and this is
yep,
just their thing. And if they
yeah,
learn how to handle it, they're going to be geniuses. If they
right.
don't learn how to handle it, then they're going to have a miserable life.
Right. And so we have to realize that the DNA is only 3% part of
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
we then respond to the world. It's really whatever experiences you had as a child. So if you dealt with a crazy parent, guess what?
Hmm.
You are statistically 97% chance that you're going to repeat some of that. And because that's been your
Right.
experiences, because you haven't been given the tools to do something different. But the awareness of that is going,
Hmm.
oh, so I came from an environment where you just enabled it and you fixed it. And guess what? I enabled it and I fixed it and I try to manage all around it. And you know what? That's the codependency crap. That's the cycle I'm
Hmm.
breaking in my family. That's like, no, I'm not doing this codependency anything more. I'm a queen and I want my king, and we can stand interdependent but not codependent. Like that is not happening anymore in my world. So this is where
Hmm.
it was really hard for me to start to understand, because I always thought that I was coming to the equation going, you know what? I always thought I was doing good by trying to help and manage. It's like, no, 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 no. People have to help and fix and manage themselves. And because I thought getting divorced was going to change that. And to your point, it doesn't change it. Like it's still the same stuff that I was dealing with in my marriage. I am dealing with post divorce. We're just in different households. And we are trying to find a new non-codependent way to do that. And there's a few nosebleeds along the way.
People unconsciously want to be led. They really do.
Yeah.
We're all running around scared. We're all running around being an anxious dog,
Right.
and the narcissist doesn't know what's going to give them a good day or a bad day. The weather can change and they're having a bad day and they don't know why. And this is the only way they know to deal with it.
Right.
Um, so they don't know either. Everybody's feeling like they're victimized.
Mhm.
And when you
That's so
decide,
true. I want people to
yeah,
hear that. So many people are walking around today victimized.
oh yeah, we live in a culture of who's to blame, whose fault is it. And I learned this as a kid in my trauma, and girls learn this a lot in trauma as their children, that the only control they have is within themselves and by taking responsibility for everything.
Hmm.
And when they would take responsibility for everything, they took responsibility for everybody else too.
Yeah.
And eh, and their lives depended upon how other people responded to them, about how do I control this person? How do I make them stop? How do I But they're not going to stop. They've got their own
Right.
issues to deal with. You're the one who has to say to yourself, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want
Right.
to feel this stressed and tense and upset and hurt and crazy. which means that I need to go outside and sit in the grass and watch the trees for an hour.
Right.
And people don't think that that stuff will help. But what it does is it takes you out of the sympathetic and moves you back into parasympathetic, which is who you actually are. That's
Right.
who you are. And you're surrounded by people who are feeling out of sorts and off balance. Everybody is. And if you walk in confident and centered and calm, authentically, other people will entrain to you. Other people will line up with the energy that you've chosen. You're now taking back your control and stopping being a victim. And because everybody else really, they just want someone to help them calm down. And if you're that person, then they'll look to you and want to start to emulate you in order to calm themselves down. Nobody wants to be crazy like that. Nobody wants to be like that.
Well,
They just
that's
don't
the
think there's
biggest
anything they
thing.
can do about it.
Well, and people don't know, someone's got to lead the pack, right? So if you happen to be the one in a relationship that's still together or one that's broke up, and you become more conscious to the patterning, then you can lead it to a different place. And, you know, I always, I heard from one of my other teachers that, Julie, just be the brightest light that you can be, because children follow the brightest light. And so do people, for that matter. You know, like, nobody wants to feel like crap. Nobody wants to do wrong. Nobody wants to, no human being does, but we're in our conditioning. And so I always say this, it's like, do you and the universe takes care of the rest. Do you and the universe takes care of the rest. And that is so true. Like, if I continue to do the next right step for what is healthy for me and healthy for my children, everything keeps falling into alignment in a beautiful way. It really is. But it's about having the courage to be able to step into it from a place of empowerment, where for a long time I didn't.
Well,
you know?
courage comes from having a community. So, okay, when you're raised in trauma, there's this whole emotional isolation thing and secrets, and nobody's supposed to know that the family's all dysfunctional.
It's the line. Can I just tell you, in Irish households, that is said all the time. Like, what goes on in the house stays in the house. But that is a freaking warning sign. If you're saying that shit, or if you're putting that out there in the world, guess what? Then you're in a relationship or you're doing stuff that is not okay. That is the pure sign. And I hear that all the time. It's because you're not stepping into it. Anyway, and then I cut you off, but
no, that's okay. I cut you off all the time, so it's fine.
But that's why I want people to hear that, because I hear that all the time. And it's like, you're like, well, it's our privacy, and well, it's this, and well, it's that. You know what? If you're not willing to show that to the world, there's probably something there you got to look at.
And I want women to have a different visual. You know, our visual is, we're stressed out, we're contracted, we're focused on ourselves, we're protecting, we're hiding, we're manipulating, we're just trying to survive. All right. When we regulate, we're able to see that we're connected physically, measurably. We can follow the wavelengths, quantum physics wise. We are in a web. We're connected with everything and everyone on a physically measurable wavelength. And when we tap into that, when we recognize that we have a whole community and resources around us, you're able to say, I'm going to do me, because I know there's so much more going on, and that the rest of this web, the rest of this community is going to take care of it. Because it does. You are only one in a much bigger world. But when we're contracted, all we see is ourselves.
Well, and if you talk to anyone who reads like the energy charts, whether it's astrological or anything today, that between now and the end of the year, more of what, if you are living your life based on, like we're talking about here, codependent relationships, to where you're deciding how you're going to respond to the world because of somebody else's behaviors. So if you're doing that in relationships, And so you're looking for an outside referral source. And that could also be your job. It could be your money situation, whatever. If you're doing that, the next 6 months energetically, you are going to wind up with experiences that are going to force you to go inside, because this heart-based consciousness movement that is happening energetically across the globe, which is why everything's happening the way it's happening, is that we have got to start to live our lives from the inside out, from our hearts, and then add our smarts, as one of my teachers, Deirdre Morgan, always says, start with your heart and then add your smarts. And it's true, because we're going to keep getting experience after experience after experience to find that happiness within, regardless of what's going on in the world around us. And find that happiness from within. And that comes to what we talked, that today's topic is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries.
And you can only set boundaries when you are centered in yourself, when you know who you are and what you want. Now, I've got a really...
Let me ask you this. There are so many people out there right now that don't know who they are and what their purpose is.
Like, they're dysregulated.
They've ignored it so long.
Yeah. And they're dysregulated. They think that being in fight or flight is their personality, and it's not. Their personality is not fight or flight. Their personality is that whole integrated self. I've got a good rule of thumb around boundaries, which is we set boundaries not to control somebody else. We set boundaries for what we're willing to tolerate, what we're willing to allow ourselves to experience. So if you don't want to experience walking into an anxious home, then you need to do something to stop you from walking into an anxious home. It's about your
without
experience.
Fixing it, though.
Without fixing it. It's about you taking responsibility for you to be centered and calm authentically, not just pretend, not just manipulate, but it's how you feel. If you're angry, it's your feeling and you need to do something about it.
Thank you for bringing that up, because, that is a really, really, really big piece that I have people argue with me all the time about. If you're the one that's emotionally triggered, something needs to shift in you. And this is where, like, we like to project it out to other people, like it's them and they're the asshole. It's Donald Trump. It's my boss. It's my spouse. Like, whoever the hell you're trying to blame today, you're triggered, which means you need to shift.
Yeah. And that's actually normal. When we're children, about 50% of people are naturally designed to hook into someone else's energy system, to be in these partnerships. And about 50% are very, individual and independent. And it keeps us safe when we're children, because we gauge how to feel. Our parents, our mothers, whoever our caregiver is regulating our nervous system for us. If you're with someone who's always dysregulated, then your nervous system is always going to be dysregulated. So you're designed to be hooking into someone else's nervous system. And as a child, you are dependent on them to keep you calm. We are no longer children, but we still fall into that same pattern. And so the pattern is to recognize when you're allowing someone else to do something about it. It can be as simple as they're screaming at you about how you are a worthless, disgusting human being who never deserved to be alive in the first place, and your kids have all the problems that they do because you're a bad mother and it's all your fault. That, of course, that's going to trigger you. But if you sit there with your foot on the ground and your ankle on your other knee and your hand on the bottom of your foot and your hand on your knee, it's not going to get you. You may feel like you're right on that edge, but you're going to be able to stay sane. Even in a moving car where you're trapped with them, you will be able to maintain a level of sanity that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. And it can be unobtrusive. Nobody, So it's about saying to yourself, what experience do I want to have? And if I don't like this experience, what do I want to do about it?
Well, and I will say to those of you watching, it's one thing to hear Rita say those things that, you'll want to go there, but you won't go there. I have literally had that experience where like my nervous system wanted to go where I used to go all the time with it. And now it's like, it's almost like I'm now looking through the window going, oh, there you are. There's that old way that I used to respond to the world because I've interrupted it on a physical level. And now I can go, oh yeah. And then I just expand into the place that I am going to. So that way of coping with it, or not even coping with it, the way of moving through that in a healthier manner does come when you use these very simple tools like you're talking about, like one hand on your knee, one hand on your ankle as you've got your legs crossed, and that has absolutely become true in my world. And it's funny, I can't even go to the way that I used to do it. Like,
right, because you're repatterning your system.
Totally. I've completely repatterned and shifted it. So it does work, and it's simple stuff. It's not stuff that you have to wait 10 years and go through, sessions with a psychologist to get through. We don't have to do that anymore. There's
right. We don't have
to get through things, much quicker ways.
If I can impress upon anyone, it's when you feel irritated, frustrated, angry, hurt, depressed, scared, sad, manipulative, eating too many M&Ms, falling into those old patterns, you need to pause and you need to do something to get regulated again. Go for a walk, hug a tree, walk barefoot in the grass, have a conversation with a friend, tap your face into oblivion, with EFT, haven, stroke your arms, go, yell at a rock. You've got to do something. And if you train yourself and support yourself, put little notes everywhere, pause, 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 pause and regulate, pause and regulate, pause and regulate. If you do that, you naturally start to hold boundaries. You naturally start to show up in your authentic self. You naturally speak your truth. You naturally have courage. You naturally start connecting to something bigger than yourself. If all you do is pause and regulate every time you've got an uncomfortable experience, you'll heal. It'll be a natural side effect. And you will look back and say, wow, how did I get here? And it's just because you trained yourself to pause and regulate your system.
And I'll share with people, like, my initial pauses were not things that I was actively pausing about. It was the fact that, okay, I just got a communication to me, whether it was text, voicemail, email, or in the divorce software that we were doing. So I watched myself get activated, but then what I did is I then put it down and came back to it at least 24 hours later. So that gave me a pause. Like, it started as simple as that I didn't need to respond to it right away.
It's a rule you made for yourself.
Well, and then what started happening is that then when we started to exchange the kids on our days, all of a sudden then it was like, if there wasn't an immediate response being given, all of a sudden he'd be in my face, even to the point of like screaming at me from the front porch, and like, because the old patterning was no longer there. And it was, again, not good or bad. I was interrupting my patterning. He was still in his patterning. And then it shifted. We're out of that now. And it's like, so it does that pause, and that needs to really, it can be that simple in how you start to change the reality of how it's all showing up in the world. And I watched that in my own world change, and it does happen. It's these little incremental steps that then build to the big picture, because I'm watching my children now take pause. My oldest and my second, they are like oil and water. And I'm just like, you're triggered. Take a step back, walk out of the room. And while the one's blowing steam out of their ears, and, but as a third party, I'm watching it going, it doesn't have to be this way. Just walk away. Just walk away. And then come back a few minutes later. And then, and so those tools are happening. And again, it's just interrupting the patterning, again, that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation.
Because the person who's screaming at you and fighting with you on your porch, they're not talking to you. They're
Right.
talking to their abuser. They're talking to the person in their mind or in their heart from their past or in their imagination that's abusing them.
Right.
You are a monster to them, which is why they're reacting the way that they are. And you know you're not a monster. You know
Right.
that they've fallen into some scary memory, some scary pattern, and they don't even see you or hear you. They're talking to their abuser.
Right.
And when you're able to stand there and have compassion for someone who is reliving their biggest fears over and over and over and over and not take it
whole different
personally.
perspective, right?
And you just keep doing your tools, you keep regulating. It doesn't have to be you're an asshole. It doesn't have to be any of that. It can be, okay, thanks for telling me how you feel. And your calm nervous system will start to calm the whole situation down. And
Right.
this mean, horrible person who's been dysregulated will start to regulate. And what confuses a lot of women is then someone who was just 10 minutes ago telling them they were the most disgusting person they've ever met is now like making you pancakes for breakfast because they got regulated again. They realized who
They
they
want
were.
that too.
They want to feel good.
They just don't know how to get there.
They don't know how to get there. And if you can teach other people how to get there, and that boundaries are not something you impose on someone else. Boundaries are you respecting yourself. I don't want to have this experience anymore. How am I going to problem solve this?
Right.
When you do that, when you look at it not as how do I stop them from screaming at me, you ask yourself, how do I stop myself from feeling anxious, even if they're screaming at me?
Well, and there was
That's
a
the
time period
boundary.
in there where I had to just sit in my car and I never got out of the car then when we exchanged kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it was like, that's what I needed to do to
Yes.
not go into old patterning.
Yes, exactly.
And again, it was the next layer that created all of us to elevate to the next place.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. When you stop doing the things that you've always been doing, the other people are forced to do something different. And if you're the calm one, they're going to naturally, subconsciously look to you as the leader. And when you do things to calm your system, it calms the other people around them. Because remember, they're probably hooked into you just as much as you're hooked into them. Your anxiety will feed their anxiety. Your calm will feed their calm. And if you can dial the whole situation down, suddenly the crazy madman becomes someone who has the ability to have some empathy and look beyond themselves. But we can't come at it from that anger place.
So someone asked us, what can you do if you wake up with bad energy?
Do something that makes you feel good. If you wake up with bad energy, that means that you're already dysregulated and you need to ask your body and ask yourself, what do I need right now? I would get dysregulated because I was dehydrated, because my blood sugar was low, because I didn't sleep well, because maybe I ate too late, or I had chocolate before I went to bed, or any of those things. It's really very simple. If you have bad energy, you must do something to have good energy as soon as humanly possible. And if that means you put everybody on hold for an hour while you go and lay in the grass and watch the clouds go by, so be it. Because otherwise you're going to spend 8, 10, 12, 24 hours of that day feeling like you've got an arm and 2 legs tied behind your back, trying to still get things done.
Right.
That is you in fight or flight. You must get yourself out of fight or flight before you can do anything else. And if you feel like you can't do anything else, then you need to use some of the hacks and some of the tools that work within seconds. If you don't have time for a walk, you need to do, the TAT points. If you don't have, if you can't get out of the situation because to leave will make it 100 times worse, You need to haven. You need to ground. You
Yep.
are the highest priority. And when you are regulated, everyone else will regulate around you. And if you wake up in a bad space, you have to find out what's encouraging that. So now I changed the water that I drink. I drink smart water because my body absorbs it easier. It's better balanced pH. It's got selenium in it, so it's encouraging my thyroid. If my stomach is burning, I go have like almond milk or hemp milk, something to soothe my stomach. If I am feeling like my skin is crawling, usually it means that my blood sugar is low and I need to go have a nutritious snack. So a lot of stress and dysregulation are physical choices we've made throughout the day. And if we start with that, it dials down the noise. And then we're able to carve out that hour to go and sit outside. Then we're able to see like, oh yeah, this person canceled their appointment. Look at that. I have a free hour. And you use it to regulate.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, that it is those little things. Because as you were talking, like for me, I know it's walking out in nature. And I know, with everything that's been going around with COVID, that's been, it's particularly in the Chicagoland area, everyone wants you to wear masks everywhere, even outside if you're more than 6 feet from people. And I just can't because I need to breathe the fresh air. I need to be in nature. Because that will regulate me to be more grounded and more calm so I can have the space, I should say, the emotional space to show up in a state of neutrality.
Yes.
And be the observer of what's going on. And that could be for whatever, whether it's my kids, my ex-husband, family, work, whatever. It's about just having that emotional space. And so you have to find what it is that works for you. And some people it's meditation. Like walking is my meditation often. And I love to sit for some reason under the trees, like the trees for some reason. That's why on this quest that I've gone on over this last week, I'm driving around the country and I know I'm headed to the sequoia forests. I'm going to go hang out with some redwood trees because
they talk to each other. There's an underground communication network within their root system, and the trees actually not only talk to each other, but when one is ailing, the other trees will give it nourishment and nutrition so that it can stay healthier. When you walk into a forest, you're walking into a literal community that's talking to each other.
Well, think about that from a humanity perspective. If we all networked and supported each other to get to that next nurturing place, as opposed to tearing each other apart, amazing how this world would be.
Well, the world is already this way. I want you to change that thought a little bit. All of everything that you need is here. That web, that community, those women, those resources, they are right here. You can't see them when you're contracted. But when you break that cycle, suddenly you see the trees are nourishing you. A friend calls you up. You have an extra 45 minutes where you can meditate. Money shows up in your bank account. I mean, you are being supported all of the time. You cannot see it when you are in fight or flight. And almost everybody is in fight or flight constantly thinking that's the norm. And that is people under stress. That's not supposed to be the norm.
Yep, exactly. Great stuff. Well, Rita, it's been an hour already. I can't even believe it.
It goes fast.
Well, I am so grateful. How can people find you?
They can find me right now at 𝑖nspireMassage.com. It's soon going to be �RitaHickmanCoaching.com. Or they can find me on Facebook. I do live streams Monday through Friday, every day. And it's usually on some interesting, intuitive topic. People find a lot of great help from it. They really do.
That's how I found you.
Yeah. and people stalk me for a while, to make sure that I'm legit. And they discover that I'm saying the exact same things that they're thinking, but I know the way out. So you can find me on Facebook, follow my live streams, go to my website. I'll always be right here, and the information doesn't change because it's the truth. It's not some fad that I'm downloading from the universe.
It's sustainable, right?
Yeah, it's sustainable and it's repeatable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I am so grateful for you joining the Awakening series. And I'm excited that in a few weeks, I have decided that I am going to be giving away my book, Awaken Your Wealth, for free.
For
People
you.
just have to pay for your shipping. If you just go to juliemurphy.com and give us your email address, and we will let you know when it comes out, because I know part of my soul's purpose in the world is to help everybody get to a happier and healthier place, and get into a place of embodiment of what I call real wealth. And because we all deserve that.
Yes.
And
yeah, we do.
And I look forward to everybody joining us again next Thursday at 9 a.m. Central for another Awaken Your Relationships. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thanks,
Julie.
Rita. Bye.
Bye.